Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, he dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heave is good. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant, insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Grizzlies win edition. My name is Keith Parrish. Ja Morant returned to the Grizzlies. He somewhat surprisingly came off the bench, and the Grizzlies kept their winning ways. They defeated the Houston Rockets 130-125. The Grizzlies have now won 10 straight games at home. They won their 31st home game. That's the second most in franchise history. They have a chance to tie the franchise record on Friday night as the Grizzlies have a rematch against these same Houston Rockets. The Grizzlies are now 23-0 in the last two seasons when they score 130 or more points. 11-0 this regular season. 11-0 last regular season. 1-0 in the playoffs last year. So the 11 130-point games matches the franchise record for the most in any regular season. So the Grizzlies have 22 130-point games in the last two regular seasons. They have 36 130-point games since Taylor Jenkins and Ja Morant got here. In the 24 years of the franchise before that, they had 13 total. So 36 130-point games in the regular season under Taylor Jenkins, 13 in the first 24 years. So Ja Morant, surprisingly, came off the bench in this one. I got that one wrong. I didn't understand the reasoning for it, but they said that maybe Ja felt more comfortable doing that. Maybe because the team had been playing well, that had some reasoning to it. They didn't want to disrupt the things that had been happening. Also, Ja obviously was on a minutes limitation. So for whatever reason, they chose to bring him off the bench. There was no Dillon Brooks in this game, which meant the Grizzlies started Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, David Roddy, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Xavier Tillman. And Ja wasn't even the first guy off the bench. They still did the regular rotation pattern of Kennard and Santi Aldama, at least the regular rotation pattern for the past several games. And then finally, Ja came in. When Ja was in the game, he was electric once again. Now, Ja Morant did address the media, and it's obviously a huge national story when a star of such prominence misses games for the somewhat controversial reasons, and now everything has come out about Ja Morant's side of the story and how he's received counseling and will continue to receive counseling. And I know people who aren't Grizzlies fans remain entirely skeptical of the entire ordeal. And honestly, some Grizzlies fans, like, it's okay if you remain skeptical of the PR aspects of, like, the interview on ESPN. Ja Morant seemed very candid in his media availability it's after shoot around on Thursday or on Wednesday, where he was talking about how, like, he doesn't feel comfortable, still doesn't feel comfortable. And I take those comments at face value and can accept that while still not understanding exactly what's going on with Ja. But I'm going to focus very little on that. As I usually try to do, I'm just going to focus on what happens on the basketball court while understanding that, a lot of people don't buy everything that's going on with Ja Morant, and obviously fans of other teams aren't super happy with everything, but that's just fandom, and that's what's going to happen. And we don't have to argue for things we don't fully understand and argue for things that we don't have all the information on. But what we do know on the basketball court is Ja Morant is electric, fantastic, and we saw that in his limited minutes. He scored 17 points, had 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, a block, a poster dunk that was absolutely phenomenal, reminding everybody that Ja Morant is that guy. He also came up with big baskets, it seemed, every time the Rockets, cut into the lead or got it close. Ja was usually there to bail the Grizzlies out with one of those floaters where he abruptly stops his dribble and shoots before the defense knows how to react. So that was all good. And, of course, this game was close. I mean, this game was, in fact, a clutch game, or it fit the parameters of NBA's clutch definition. The Grizzlies had their halftime lead erased in the third quarter. It was back and forth for a while. The Rockets tied it with a little over 4 minutes to go, but some big plays down the stretch by Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant, Desmond Bane came through. Jaren, I haven't mentioned it yet. Jaren was monstrous in this game once again. Jaren had 37 points, the second most he's ever had in a game, behind the 43 points he had against the Bucks several years ago. He scored 25 or more for the fifth straight game, extending his career-high streak. He was 14 out of 20 from the field, 13 out of 15 on two-pointers. He dominated the paint. He big-boyed the Rockets defenders all night. He was a dominant force. That streak of 5 straight games of 25 or more, that's tied for the second longest streak in franchise history. Ja Morant has the longest streak with 8 straight games of scoring 25 or more. Now Jaren, with his personal best streak, is tied for the second longest one in Grizzlies franchise history with Ja, with Marc Gasol, and with Rudy Gay. In these 5 games, Jaren has had at least 1 block in all of them, so he's the first player in Grizzlies franchise history to have 5 straight games with at least 25 points and 1 block. In the last 5, he's averaging 29.8 points per game, 7 rebounds, 2.4 blocks. He's made 62% of his field goal attempts in that span. If you want to narrow it down even further, get hyper-specific / hyper-arbitrary. In his last 4 games, he has 124 points and 11 blocks. The only players to do that in the last 20 NBA seasons have a 4-game span with at least 124 points and 11 blocks. This is the list of guys to do it. Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, those guys did it a ton of times. Then Giannis, Kristaps Porzingis, DeMarcus Cousins, Dwight Howard, Dwayne Wade, Amari Stoudemire, LeBron James, Yao Ming, Elton Brand, Jermaine O'Neal, Tim Duncan, and Shaq. That's a good list of players. Every single one of those guys, all NBA players at some point in their careers. Jaren keeps being this primary offensive option, and I think it's great for the Grizzlies. I think it's fantastic. Now, a lot of the Grizzlies' good offensive numbers, a lot of Ja Morant looking great in his first game back, Jaren Jackson Jr. looking awesome, most of the rest of the team all having pretty good numbers, is because you're playing the Rockets. Yeah, it was a close game, but the Rockets do not provide much resistance on the defensive end, so you end up with a lot of good-looking offensive numbers, a lot of good-looking highlights, and because of that, while we can be encouraged by a lot of the things that happened, we also wonder, like, all right, that was a pretty bad defensive performance. Yeah, Dillon Brooks was out. Are we going to correlate no Dillon Brooks with allowing 125 points to the Rockets? Probably not a direct correlation, just a 1-game blip, but I guess we can make a note of it. Like the Grizzlies for the season, best field goal percentage defense in the NBA. They allowed the Rockets to shoot 51.6% from the field. Jalen Green had a huge monster game. KJ Martin had a career high in scoring. Kevin Porter Jr. put up a triple-double. So wasn't the best defensive performance by any stretch of the imagination for the Grizzlies. They also got destroyed on the offensive glass. They gave up a season-high tying for their opponent 20 offensive rebounds. That remains an issue with the team without Steven Adams and without Brandon Clark. It's also somewhat a product of small ball, but generally the small ball's been working for the Grizzlies. More on that in a second. Like in the month of March, the Grizzlies are 29th in the NBA in opponent offensive rebounds. For the season, they are 25th. So that remains a little bit of a problem. But the good news is the Grizzlies have been getting second chance points of their own. which they actually beat the Rockets in second chance scoring in this game, despite giving up all those offensive rebounds. Another area where they beat the Rockets in this one is bench scoring. The Grizzlies bench outscored the Rockets bench 42-7. Now, some of that is the Rockets starters scored a ton of points. Şengün also had a massive offensive game. Although Şengün was the secret hero down the stretch for the Grizzlies. Yeah, it was nice. The Grizzlies pulled out a clutch win. Honestly, it was good. They just got practice in close games, in clutch games. They've played, I believe, still the second fewest clutch games of any team this year. But with the game close, Şengün committed a very blatant and poor offensive rebounding foul, a loose ball foul, going for an offensive rebound, put Jaren Jackson Jr. on the line, and then he made his free throws. That put the Grizzlies up 4. Then Şengün committed an offensive foul where Morant stepped in, made a big defensive play as the help defender. It was called a blocking foul. Good job by Taylor Jenkins and the coaching staff electing to challenge this call. It was overturned. That became an offensive foul turnover on Şengün. That meant Morant picked up his 4th drawn charge of the season. That is a career high in drawn charges for Morant. He drew 3 his rookie year. As a team this year, the Grizzlies are actually way up in drawn charges. The Grizzlies have now drawn 25 charges this season, led by John Konchar, who's drawn 7. Now, that's not good league-wide. That's still bottom third of the NBA league-wide, but they've drawn 25 this season. Last season, they only drew 13 for the whole year. That was 29th in the NBA. The season before that, they only drew 16 for the entire year. That was last in the NBA that year. So I'm guessing it was a focus on the Grizzlies that, hey, we need to start drawing charges. Now, if you listen to this show and you listen to Fast Break Breakfast, you know I hate charges. I don't really think it's defense. I think it's a dangerous play most of the time. I don't understand how undercutting an airborne guy going for a dunk or a layup is encouraged by the rules. But these are the rules we have. It's the rules we have to play with. Do I enjoy it when we play defense without drawing charges? Of course, that's what I prefer. But hey, it's an imperfect world. It's an imperfect system of rules, and you have to use the charge to your benefit, especially when you're, only have one shot blocker in Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah, he's the NBA's leading shot blocker in blocks per game and block percentage, but being undersized like the Grizzlies are a lot of the time, especially if you got Bane and Kennard and Tyus on the court together, or Ja and Tyus on the court together, or Ja, Tyus, and Luke Kennard, which they actually had briefly for just a second in this game. The Grizzlies have some smaller wings, are going to be playing some smaller combinations, and so you have to use that tool of the offensive foul, drawing offensive fouls, and I'm guessing they focused on that to some point as a team to highlight, hey, we need to do this more. This is one avenue that we're not using on defense that other teams are using, and we can use it to our benefit. And in this one, it was a game-changing play. Instead of Şengün going to the line, down 4, it's a turnover. Desmond Bane scores a driving layup on the subsequent possession, and that's basically the hammer-nail coffin moment Grizzlies win. Desmond Bane in this game, he finished with 20 points. He had 7 assists and 0 turnovers, which is an awesome bounce back from his previous game where he had 2 assists and 6 turnovers. While amassing those 7 assists, he ended up passing Brevin Knight for 22nd in Grizzlies franchise history in total assists. Desmond made 3 3-pointers in this game. He's now 4 3-pointers from passing Rudy Gay for 5th in franchise history in made threes. So Tyus Jones gets the start. This is obviously a different look for the Grizzlies of starting Tyus Jones while having Morant available. He did not, show any maybe nervousness about having to perform ahead of Morant. Tyus had a fine game. He scored 14, had 7 assists and 0 turnovers, made 3 of 6 of his 3-pointers. He helped guide the Grizzlies. I think you give him a lot of credit. He helped guide the Grizzlies to a 75-point first half. The Grizzlies score a lot when Tyus Jones starts. for whatever reason, they put together these huge halves a lot of the time when Tyus Jones is the starter in there. Now, we've never had this situation before where Tyus Jones started and also Ja Morant was available. But for whatever reason, and again, give the Rockets their due and their lack of defense, but the Grizzlies had their fourth 75-point first half of the season, 75 or more, that is. By the way, last year they only had 2 first halves where they scored 75 or more. The season before that, they only had 2 first halves where they scored 75 or more. The 25 seasons before that, they only had 2 first halves total where they scored 75 or more. So the Grizzlies have a big first half. Again, like I said, they let the Rockets get back into it, but hey, all's well that end well. Now, going back to the bench situation, 42 points off the bench, and you got to give a lot of credit. One, Ja Morant, 6th man. But Luke Kennard continues to play very, very well. Luke Kennard scored 13 points in this game. Kennard has now scored in double digits in 5 straight games. He's made 2 or more threes in 5 straight games. He's posted a positive plus-minus in 4 straight games and in 5 of the last 6 games. That's raised his overall net rating into the positive for his time on the Grizzlies. In the last 5 games, where he's made 2 or more threes in all of them, he's averaged 3.4 made threes in those games. Now, the first of those 5 games in that streak is that Miami game where he made 4 in garbage time. I said we shouldn't count those threes for anything, so we can throw that out. But still, in the 4-game winning streak, he's made a bunch of threes, and he's made a bunch of big shots. He's been a huge positive force for the Grizzlies bench. We can recognize that. He said in media availability on Wednesday that this team has really been encouraging him to shoot more. He says he's always, in his entire career, had the team, the coaching staff tell him, you got to shoot more, you got to shoot more. He says, but the Grizzlies have been maybe even more aggressive about it. And I don't know if there's a direct correlation, but we can start drawing a correlation between the Grizzlies' shooting numbers. The Grizzlies, in the 55 games they played this year, without Luke Kennard, they were averaging 11.2 made threes per game. That's exactly in line with what they averaged in made threes per game in the previous season. Now, it's only been 17 games, but in the last 17 games, with Luke Kennard, the Grizzlies are up to 13 made threes per game. So that is a very, very positive development. They only made 12 threes in this one, but you'll take it. 12 threes is a far cry from the games of having 8 or 9 or 7. 12 threes is going to be enough most of the time for this Grizzlies team. So there seems to be a direct benefit from the acquisition of Luke Kennard and the Grizzlies making more three-pointers. I mean, it makes sense, right? You add a three-point shooter, you let him play, you should be able to increase your three-point output as long as he's not replacing a shooter, another shooter. You know, you're not taking another shooter off the board. The fact that you're giving him more of the minutes that might have gone to Zaire or Conchar does mean your three-point volume should increase. And also, of course, for over half of the games the Grizzlies have had Luke Kennard, there's been no Ja Morant. So is Tyus Jones making more threes than Ja would have. So there are a few different factors, but it does seem like the acquisition of Luke Kennard has led to the Grizzlies having better three-point output. Also off the bench, and he didn't score a lot, but this was notable. I mean, I'm pretty deep into the episode relatively without mentioning this yet. For us diehards, members of the Kenneth Lofton Union of Believers, the club would like to point out that Kenneth Lofton Jr. played in the regular first half rotation. The Grizzlies went 10 deep again, so Kenneth Lofton Jr. got first half minutes for the second time in his career, and he responded. I mean, the guy makes plays. One thing I've said on this show before is that Kenneth Lofton Jr. has always succeeded at basketball. Now, of course, most guys who make the NBA have always succeeded at basketball. But recently, I feel like people have doubted Kenneth Lofton Jr. He was a high school All-American, and then it's been, all right, maybe he can't do it at this level. Maybe he can't do it at this level. But every time he's played, he's done well, and so I've always been like, let's just see how long it goes. Let's give him a chance. And he's responded very, very well in the opportunities he's gotten in these 2 games in the first halves. And when he comes in the second halves, it's part of the regular rotation, not garbage time, it's gone well. The Grizzlies have succeeded with him on the court. He makes big plays. He had some nice assists. He had that coast-to-coast rebound to layup. Again, good job, Rockets. I can't not point out that the Rockets are terrible at defense, but Kenneth Lofton Jr. keeps playing well, keeps giving the Grizzlies maybe another option to put on the court when they're so short-handed in the front court. All right, now let's take a break for a word from the sponsor, and I'll be right back to wrap up the show. All Grizz, all the time. Stay connected and follow at memphisgrizzlies and at Grind City Media across all social channels, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, for breaking news, one-of-a-kind content, and all the perspectives you won't find anywhere else. Okay, by virtue of winning this game against the Rockets and by the Mavericks losing to the Warriors, the Grizzlies are now back-to-back Southwest Division champions. The only 2 division titles in franchise history. I am excited about being a division title winner. We got destroyed by the Spurs for decades. Now I'm happy to say that the Grizzlies are the cream of the crop in the Southwest Division. A couple other assorted stats and notes that I haven't gotten to yet. The fourth quarter score of this game was 29-29, so that snaps the 7-game run where the Grizzlies outscored their opponent in the fourth quarter. Reminder, they'd only allowed 17.7 points per game, or points per fourth quarter, in their previous 6 wins. Not all good runs can last forever. David Roddy got the start for Dillon Brooks. He had 13 points, 3 rebounds, only made 1 out of 5 threes, but had some good activity on offense. Also tapped the sign. Everybody looked good when you're playing the Rockets defense. Xavier Tillman started once again. He only played 19 minutes. They continue to look elsewhere for fourth quarter lineups. They are not playing Xavier Tillman that frequently as part of closing lineups. They tend to either favor Jaren is the only big, or Jaren is the 5 alongside Aldama or Roddy. They closed this game with yet another different closing lineup. The carousel of different closing lineups continues, obviously because of no Dillon Brooks in this case. They were going with Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard. So Morant, Kennard, Bane with Aldama and Jaren. They did that for a little bit, and they're like, no, let's bring in Roddy again. So Roddy closed the game as a 4, a particularly small lineup. Ja, Luke, Dez, with Roddy as a 4, and then Jaren Jackson Jr. as the 5. One of the interesting things about bringing Ja off the bench is he ended up playing more minutes with Luke Kennard than he has, I believe, in any previous game. They've only had, 7 games together or so. Maybe it's 8. But he hadn't played. Ja Morant honestly hadn't played that much with Luke Kennard. Also, he hadn't played much with Luke Kennard and Desmond Bane at the same time. Coming into this game, Cleaning the Glass said those guys had played 7 possessions together. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard had played 7 possessions together before this game. They played 20 possessions together in this game. So you got to see this lineup of Ja Morant, your best player, your best attacker, your best paint scorer, your best finisher, with the 2 best shooters on the team. And we hadn't really seen that up until this point. And so that was, I guess, a result of the way just the rotation played out. I'd like to see more of that. We also got to see them play with Kenneth Lofton Jr. and Jaren Jackson Jr. Come on now. Who isn't excited about trying that lineup out a little bit more? John Conchar led the team with 3 steals in this game, 2 points and 2 rebounds, finished out his stat line. These teams play again on Friday. I believe it's a Ja Morant bobblehead night, so make sure you get there. I believe it's the first 3,000 people get a Ja Morant bobblehead, so you're definitely going to want to get that. And the Grizzlies, as we look at the standings, are now 2 games up on the Sacramento Kings. They both have 10 games left. Each have 5 home games, 5 road games, but the Grizzlies are the 2 seed, 2 games ahead with 10 to play. The Grizzlies do have 4 more conference losses than the Kings, so unless the Kings are truly exceptionally awful in their last 10 games, the Kings will have a tiebreaker on the Grizzlies. So just win 1 more game than the Kings of your final 10 games, and the Grizzlies will be the 2 seed for the second season in a row. Pretty awesome. Anyways, thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Grits and Grinds YouTube channel. Please write me a 5-star review in whatever podcast app you are listening to this on. Hope you have a great Thursday. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.